Welcome back. Today I'm going to do a quick book review. I'm not a professional book critic, but I do read a lot. And I don't always read chess books, but my wife knows that I'm into chess. And so when she was at the library recently, she picked up this book. It's the latest book by Susan Polgar called Rebel Queen, The Cold War, Misogyny, and the Making of a Grandmaster. Just a couple of notes about the genre in general, the genre of memoirs. I've read several memoirs in my time, maybe a couple of dozen at most, and I don't think any of them were masterpieces as far as the writing quality is concerned. And there might just be something about writing about your own life, in your own words that doesn't lend itself to masterpieces. So I'm not going to talk about the quality of the writing or even the editing, really, although there was one chapter, maybe about midway through, where it felt like it wasn't fully edited together yet. All the pieces were still in chronological order, but there wasn't a lot of continuity between one section of paragraphs and the next section of paragraphs. And you would think you were still in this part of the story, and suddenly you were in a different part of the story or in a different location with different people. That one chapter just, like I said, it felt a little odd, but the book as a whole felt a lot like all the other memoirs that I've read. It's somebody telling about their own life in their own words. But in this case, it's one of the most well-known women chess players of all time. Up until I read this book, I mainly knew Susan Polgar as the author of another book that I'm working on. It's just a book full of chess puzzles, but mainly as the sister of Judith Polgar. I've heard of Judith Polgar. I think she is the highest rated woman of all time. And I've seen her commentating on YouTube videos and stuff. And I just knew that Susan was her sister, and I'm pretty sure they had another sister. So I didn't know a lot before starting this book. One thing that made the book a little poignant for me, besides the fact that it's about chess, which I enjoy, but it's the fact that Miss Polgar was born just a few years before me. And so our lives were running on parallel tracks in different parts of the world, but through the same timeline. It's different than reading a biography about Abraham Lincoln or somebody that was, lived in an entirely different century than you. In this case, we were children at about the same time. We were in high school at least 1 year at the same time, and so on. Of course, she grew up hearing about the Cold War in Hungary, and I grew up hearing about the Cold War in the United States, so we had different views on it maybe at that time. But anyway, that was one thing that made it really interesting to me. So a lot of the things that are happening in the world in the background of this book, I remember those things happening when I was young. One thing I didn't hear a lot about when I was young was chess, because it wasn't a big deal in the United States. And in fact, that's one of the subjects in this book that she talks about later when she did move to the United States. Part of her goal here was, to make chess more common, more popular, more well-known, more attractive for young people to get into. Because she came from, the Soviet bloc, where kids were encouraged to get into chess. And there was this huge Soviet machine, as it's sometimes called, building all these grandmasters. The misogyny part of the subtitle on the, on the front page, I don't think there's any question about that. In countries all over the world, if, entering certain professions, if you were a woman, you were going to have a harder time than if you were a man. I wouldn't say that's the primary focus of the book, but it's one of the huge major focuses. Because when she started playing chess, her gender immediately became an obstacle for her because of the way that the system was set up, the way that FIDE was set up, the way that her country's chess federation was set up. And when she just wanted to enter a chess tournament, they're like, oh, here, you could just go play with these girls so you don't bother us. And so throughout her career, she experienced a lot of pushback trying to compete in men's tournaments. And in fact, once even qualified for the World Championship, the cycle, not the World Championship match itself, but the cycle that leads up to the World Championship. She qualified for this and was on her way to possibly getting into the candidates tournament. But FIDE said, no, that's just for men. The Cold War was a big part of it, too, because of the way that the communist government structure was set up there in Hungary, which, of course, was, run by the Communist Party, single-party government. And so especially in her childhood and teen years, that was a big part of it. As she's trying to travel to chess tournaments, once she's, they're actually letting her play in them, it became really difficult for, say, her entire family to accompany her to a chess tournament. And so sometimes they would, just send one parent with her so that the other parent and siblings had to stay back just in case they got any funny ideas. And if I'm not mistaken, she was already an adult by the time that whole thing came tumbling down. And then suddenly there wasn't a Cold War anymore. I had a really enjoyable time reading the book. So if you do like chess books or you like nonfiction, take a look at it if it's available in your local library or you feel like purchasing it. Personally, I almost never buy hardcover books because of the expense, right? I wait until they come out on paperback, unless they're in the library, but I think you'll find it worth your time. Thanks for spending your time here. As always, I'll see you in the next one.